Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the 5-Minute The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring podcast with your host, Gadian. That's me. I hope you're all having a good time. I myself had a very productive summer, and by productive, I mean I traveled a bunch. And since I live in Switzerland, I sort of hit a jackpot with that, so all I saw were mountain lakes, mountains, castles, and hills and woods, and oh, it was glorious. But one of the greatest things, and ironically fitting things to this podcast, was the exhibition of the incredibly talented John Howe. Now, you have seen some of his artworks already as visual references in past episodes, because John Howe is one of the Tolkien illustrators. And, as luck would have it, there is an art exhibition called Tour du Fantastique in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, and I can highly recommend it for anyone who can go and is a fan. A hashtag not sponsored. Tour is French and means tower because it's inside a tower. It's not tour as in tour, like a tour of art. It's 4 floors of incredible artwork, sketches and other things John Howe created, and spread throughout are little TVs on which he tells you some bits of his artistic process and what inspires him or gives him new perspectives. And more, of course. At the end of the entire exhibition, there was a little art book where guests, like people who came, could, write something and draw something in it for him, and I did so as well. I drew the sigil of Erendil and quoted Our Lady Galadriel, and it was a lot of fun. I felt so inspired afterwards and uplifted for some reason. Of course, there is a beautiful art book with all the displayed art inside, so you can always have a peek at it whenever you feel like it, and you can bet your sweet Pippi Precious that I got one. Yes, my precious! The exhibition is until October 2026, but if it has some moderate success, I can imagine that it might come back for another time. But that is just my guess, like I said. I just had to mention this exhibition because, it's also Tolkien related, as is this film. And to this film, we are now going back to Do Not Worry. Enough of free non-sponsored advertisements. Today we shall enter episode 11, which begins at minute 50, where Gandalf is magically pinned against a wall, but he just pulled his arms to himself, and end at minute 55 in a dark forest of the Shire, where we see Merry Brandybuck look behind himself to check for something? Ooh, what is going on? Are they being chased? Ooh, it remains tense. Let's find out together in episode 11. Gandalf pulls himself off the wall with the sheer force of his will and might. He falls and plants face first onto the hard black obsidian-like floor. That must have hurt, and he most likely got a bruise at least. We cut to behind Saruman, who is slowly approaching Gandalf, and in this shot we can see a nice window, or door, behind Gandalf. I didn't notice this one before, but it also appeared when we entered this room with the 2 wizards, and the camera was doing their round about them. There it is. I missed it probably because I was so focused on the Palantir and excited to talk about that one, but we can have a look at it now. The reason as to why I want to look at it is because, well, it is the only thing of actual color here. Look at it. It seems to be a grand glass door that has some colors of green and magenta, or a bizarre pink at least. Is that a Wicked reference? Is there a Wicked reference in my Lord of the Rings movie? I mean, Gandalf is later defying gravity. The shapes are mostly stripes and some circles. The center at the top almost makes the 2 halves look like a joined skull surrounded by pink and magenta. My god, Saruman is a goth, but with color. This could be the door that leads to the small balcony of Orthanc. We see it later in the movie, or at least one of them. There is a balcony in the alcove of the tower that is right above the entrance staircase. So perhaps this glass window door leads to that. It is not really a glass door or window, but a stained glass door or window, which is far more intricate and complicated to create. Fun fact! The earliest records we have of stained glass windows are from the Egyptians and Romans. There it was not really a window made up of different colorful shapes that ended up making an image, but a mosaic made of several different colored pieces. But that base certainly was used to come up with several incredible pieces throughout history. The popularity of stained glass windows exploded with religious iconography in the 12th century, and we can see that hype to this day. Every big church in Europe you find has beautiful and colorful windows depicting stories and events of their scriptures. But this glass window door has no noticeable iconography and simply exists in 2 colors. And they are not Númenórean at all. Again, the classical Númenórean colors would be the same we see for Gondor. Blue, white, silver, or just black and white. This color scheme here must be of Saruman's design. It does fit in a way that it looks gloomy. I mean, many Disney villains in the Renaissance era had green as their color. We do associate a certain shade of green with evil and impurity. Like a brook of water that has been drying in the summer sun, and all that algae and muck from below is rising to the surface, making it look horrible shade of green. I want normal temperatures again. Maybe it wasn't the lust for power, but his artistic endeavors that caused Saruman to become evil. Maybe he simply should have attended an art college, when all of this horrible murder and death could have been prevented. Tragic. Gandalf also doesn't like this. Well, probably more being lifted into the air and face planting onto the hard rock, but we don't know entirely. Maybe he's upset with this color scheme. He shouts and thrusts his own staff forward, and we hear the same sound we heard before when Saruman used his staff, and with an invisible force, Saruman is pushed and falls back onto his white, traitorous ass. We see Saruman flabbergasted. Did he really just do that? To me, the leader of his order? How dare he? And he gets up and pushes his staff forward, and Gandalf is kicked in the side and he falls over not far away from Saruman. We see Gandalf in pain, and on his forehead we see a streak of red blood. He didn't have that one before, so either that came up in between shots, or we couldn't see it in the quick moving between shots and he got it from his fall. Gandalf gets a good few hits in, he throws Saruman onto the floor and pushes him hard against the stone walls. And with enough force, I'm sure he could have broken his neck. I mean, look at the edges here. But then Saruman gets up and makes Gandalf twirl through the air before he falls back onto the hard floor. And Saruman is not done. And no. He continues to push and shove Gandalf with an invisible force around the room. And we see his face briefly, and he too got some cuts that led to some bloody spots on him. So the floor and all its edgy walls certainly did their job on cutting whoever is inside. But great design. The Númenóreans really were not the best architects when it came to living-proofing this place. Gandalf throws his back into it and we see Saruman fly away, but not before Gandalf himself falls onto his ass. I guess he had too much momentum in that one. Saruman is thrown against the heavy doors of his study room and they open with a loud bang. We cut back to Gandalf, who is back on his feet, but he just fell on his butt. I saw, you saw, we all saw. But the way he is standing makes it look like he never fell, and that he has just casted the spell, pushed Saruman through the steel door of his wannabe study room. Mr. Major, I see an error, Mr. Major. Do you know that he's a production designer and technically has absolutely no influence on what goes into such a scene or not, right? Oh look, a dramatic twist! The music utterly swells to choir crescendos, and Saruman claws his hands towards the staff of Gandalf, and sack! It is ripped from Gandalf's grip, and it is now in Saruman's hand. We see Gandalf's shocked face and the blood drips down his forehead. We can easily conclude that without a staff, a wizard can't do much, especially against another wizard who happens to have two. The staff of the wizards are tools for them to conduct the magic of the world a bit better and probably function as a symbol of rank as well. After all, the wizards are Maya who took on physical form to dampen their power, so a staff was like a key to a bigger well of said power. Well, that sucks, because Saruman uses these staffs now against Gandalf and pushes him harder against the floor, and his expression is that of victory and absolute fuck yes. Saruman, you really are a sadistic son of a Vala. Anyway, we cut to the two staffs side by side. Saruman's black staff with a white orb on top, and Gandalf's wooden staff with a neat slot for his smoking pipe. I love this little detail, and side by side, it just shows how connected Gandalf is to the world of Middle-earth, and how detached Saruman is. A singular black tower that is immovable and never interacts with the world on its own accord. I mean, it shows how he lives as well, in a big tower where people have to come to him to get information or aid in any form. He doesn't interact much with the world, but the world interacts with him. And I think that feeds into his god complex. Or Vala complex? I mean, it shows how he lives as well, in a big tower, removed, where people have to come to him to get information or aid in any form. Each of the wizards got their staff from the Vala before they left for Middle-earth, and later, when Gandalf returns as Gandalf the White in the Two Towers, spoiler, Gandalf dies and comes back with a level up, spoiler. Gandalf then has a new staff that looks very elegant and almost elf-like in design. I mean, it does remind me of a roof in Rivendell or Lothlorien. And that makes sense, because in the books he gets his new staff from Galadriel, When he came back with more power, he was then carried to Lothlorien by the Eagles, where they put some new clothes on him and gave him that staff. That makes me wonder though how the elves made such a staff, and they even knew that they should make a staff. Like, why would they have that on reserve? How did they know the components to make such a staff? But also, they made artifacts, like the Rings of Power, so maybe Galadriel got a vision from Varda and a nice blueprint from that. In the movies, he simply has this new staff, but the books also don't go too much into detail as to how he got his new attire and weapon. There, Gandalf simply tells them that Galadriel gave him the staff and new clothes. Speaking of weapons, Saruman uses the two staff to further subdue Gandalf, and he slowly makes him spin. Spin? That is your plan, Saruman, to make Gandalf sick until he joins you simply to get out of the hellish roller coaster ride? You know him longer than me, so you would know his weaknesses. He approaches Gandalf and laments. I don't know, it sounds more like he's stating things and not really lamenting the fact that Gandalf didn't want to help him. He says that he gave him the chance to help him willingly, but that Gandalf chose the way of pain. And with the word pain, he rises the staffs upwards and Gandalf flies higher and higher up inside of the tower. The different floors and windows rush past us, and quickly we see the ceiling come ever closer, and then we cut to Gandalf, who in a bad early 2000s CGI sequence is coming closer to the camera, while the inside of Orthanc shrinks below him. His eyes get closer, the blood is still dripping from his forehead, and we cut back to his perspective, and the ceiling is right there, and crack! Well, Gandalf's dead. A bit too early for the story, but oh well. No kidding. When I saw the film for the first time as a child, I thought that Gandalf had died here. I think because he was bloody and my little 8-year-old self always thought, when you're bloody on TV, you are close to death. That is why they show it. Why else would they show blood, Oh, how naive I was. But Gandalf has been simply defeated and now is imprisoned on top of Orthanc, because that's where we will find him later. Spoilers. But also that is what happens in the books. Well, not exactly this. Because in the books, it's a little different. Because of course it is. In the books, Gandalf is escorted to the top of Orthanc by the guards of Isengard. Humans who serve Saruman as watchmen and, guards. We never see them in the films, but in the books they are mentioned as soon as Gandalf crosses the stone ring of Isengard. They are men of the Dunlandings, who are the wildlings, if we want to keep it very simple. They are enemies, or at least unhappy neighbors, with the Rohirrim, and Saruman made use of that hatred, so they work for him now. But they are, after all, normal humans. At least I think that those were the guards when Gandalf entered Isengard. Afterwards it was a mix of orcs and uruks and men, all the shebang. I don't have a great segue for the next part, so hard cut! With Gandalf's echoing scream, we cut to a big green field in the sunny Shire. There is no music, and we have a moment to recollect ourselves, and hear the birds singing and the rustling of the field. The camera moves downwards, and we see Sam coming out of the tall field of corn. He walks a few steps, and his expression shifts to one of, uh-oh. And we cut to the path before him. Nothing. No one is there. No Frodo to see. And before we talk about, the issue of losing Frodo, I would like to talk about corn. Yes, the vegetable. Since we are in a massive cornfield that belongs to the farmer Maggot, something that we will learn later, I thought, those corns are tall, and they are towering over Sam easily. But he's a hobbit, and therefore normal corn would do that anyway. Wait, is this normal corn or Shire Corn? And if it is Shire Corn, is it as tall as normal corn? So, according to Wikipedia, corn can grow up to 1.5 to 3 meters. That checks out. Whenever I pass a fully grown field of corn, they are at least 2 heads taller than me, and I border 1.8 meters. Hobbits in turn can grow only between 90 centimeters to 1.1 meter, though most are on the lower ends. So if this is Shire Corn, with the proportion of hobbits in mind, then I would guess that these are maybe 1.8 meters in height? Maybe? Fun fact! In real life, it just so happens that Sean Astin, aka Sam, was one, if not the shortest cast member, with only 1.68 meters in height. And if the corn is much taller than him right now, you can assume it's almost 3 meters tall. So, normal corn on Earth, but hobbit proportioned corn on Arda. We cut back to Sam and see his travel jacket a bit better. It's of a light brown cotton, and underneath he has another thinner cotton jacket, and under that we see a white shirt. I know we are traveling here during, I think, late September, but just seeing this as I experience a horrible drought-like summer just makes me sweat as I type this and record this, evidently. Just the image is too hot. Across his chest, we see a strap belonging to what I think is his water skin. At least it has some sort of cork there, and it then loops a bit to his back again. That is one tiny water skin! But maybe it has something else, like brandy or something inside. But then again, why would you carry brandy with you? Sure, to keep warm when it gets really cold at night, but look at him! He is wearing several layers on him, and at night they make a fire. I refuse to believe that this mini water skin is for keeping him warm. Sam then gets scared and he walks with more speed. He calls out for Frodo and we cut to his perspective, looking from right to left and back again. As he begins to slowly run, we hear the clinkering of his pots and pans, and right after he calls Frodo again, Frodo in question comes back from around the corner and looks at Sam with a, "What's the problem, Sam?" look. Sam, to his relief, says that he thought he'd lost Frodo, and Frodo asks what he is talking about. Frodo, did you pay zero attention to your travel buddy? The friend Gandalf has appointed to you to keep you safe and make sure you arrive at Rivendell in, well, at least Tabri in one piece? Yes, you didn't listen? Oh well, I happily remind you. We see that on a path in the middle of the field. Great, so that means that this path leads in and out of the field. Frodo himself is on that path, presumably so that they later leave the fields. But Sam came into the field from the side and then got onto the path, and when he did, he looked up and was visibly anxious because Frodo had just vanished. So they must have cut across the field to save some time together, but Frodo was probably a little quicker. No wonder if you carry far less. And then he must have sped right off, assuming that Sam was right behind him. But he wasn't, and you would have known that, Frodo Baggins, because Sam carries pots and pans, and that make a horrible amount of noise. I think he just wanted some peace and quiet. I would too, if I had someone with me who clangs with every step. It's like being a cow and hearing an annoying bell with every step you take. So don't come to me with this, "What are you talking about, Sam?" attitude. I see you, Frodo Baggins. You and your introverted desire to be alone for a minute or two. We cut to over Frodo's shoulder and we see Sam approach him, and I never really talked about feet before. Don't get weird, I'm talking about the Hobbit feet prosthetics, of course. So, every day, when the Hobbit actors needed to, well, you know, show their glorious Hobbit feet on screen, they needed to go to the makeup department and get not only ears and hair done, but of course, the feet as well. Imagine them like slip-in shoes that were glued to the bottom of your feet, and then with hair dryers and airbrushes, the seams were sealed and made realistic looking. And since they couldn't sit while this was going on because their heels would bend or not bend the right way, they had to stand. Every morning for 2 hours. Well, at least every time they had to put on these feet. There are better ways to start your day as an actor, I imagine. Fun fact. The guy who worked on Sean Astin's feet was called Sean Foot. I'm not kidding, that's his name. Not only does he share a name with the actor he is working with and on, but also his last name is directly connected to the work he did on the actor he shares a name with and works on. Do you know how little the odds of this happening? How many stars and planetary events in the cosmos had to happen so this ironic shit could take place? No? Me neither. What? You don't know either, and I'm not a math freak, so yeah, I'm only a freak about the Lord of the Rings, okay? Speaking of, Sam then recounts words Gandalf told him. Don't you lose him, Samwise Gamgee. And he doesn't mean to, he says. That line will play a significant role at the very end of the movie, so, foreshadowing. Frodo, with a semi-chuckle, asks Sam whatever could happen to them since they are still in the Shire. And as if on cue, Sam is tackled to the ground by Merry with vegetables in his arms, and shortly after, Frodo as well is body-checked to the ground by Pippin, who also has some veggies that do not belong to him. Pippin exclaims that he bumped into Frodo, and he asks for Merry's attention. And polite as ever, Merry greets him. How nice! Remember, these two are friends and also cousins to Frodo, so it makes sense that they know him and kinda like him. Well, Sam cares little for the two troublemakers, and he yanks Pippin away from Frodo and lifts his travel companion back onto his feet. Fun fact? It is funny for me to think that Sam basically manhandles, well, Hobbit handles, Shire royalty like this. I mean, yeah, okay, the Shire doesn't have royalty per se, but Pippin is a member of the Took family and Merry of the Brandybucks, two very old and respected families throughout the Shire, though some would call them a little queer. And by queer, I mean weird. Yeah, The Lord of the Rings is an old book, okay? Pippin and Merry are also equipped with some travel gear. Merry has a backpack, carrying a dust green jacket with a fancy yellow button-up shirt, and Pippin has a deep green jacket, a brown scarf, and a white shirt with a bag over his shoulder that reminds me much of a messenger bag. But it also could be a great mushroom bag. More foreshadowing. Sam exclaims that the two of them had been at the Farmer Maggot's crop again, and similar to before, on cue, we hear the barking of dogs, and all four hobbits turn to the source of the barking. We see a long scythe above the fields and a man shouting into their general direction. This is Farmer Maggot, the actual and true Farmer Maggot of this film, who is furious about the fact that two of the wealthiest hobbits have stolen from him. I remind you, both Pippin and Merry are considered adults. Yeah, I'd be pissed too. Merry grabs Frodo by his shoulders and yanks him forward. Pippin is long gone, he is nowhere to be seen. The music that plays is almost playful and dances around a bit, like a silly cat and mouse situation, which it kind of is. Compared to the tragic betrayal at Orthanc or the dangerous Black Riders, this is a nice sort of danger. But a danger it is still, and Sam now stands alone, with all the stolen crop in his hands, and he better not be caught himself. And quickly, he drops the vegetables and makes a dash after the three other hobbits. We follow the hobbits as they try to escape Farmer Maggot and his dogs. Merry wonders why the farmer is so upset about a few stolen carrots. But Pippin adds that they also took some cabbages. Not the cabbages! And some potatoes the week before, and some mushrooms before that. And all while he confesses their petty theft, we hear the dog bark less and less, as they put some good distance between themselves and the angry canine and its equally angry owner. Now in the books, it's a little different, because of course it is. There they meet Farmer Maggot in chapter 4 called A Shortcut to Mushrooms. That is a fitting title for what is about to happen here in the movie, but I'm getting ahead of myself. See, when Frodo goes to leave the Shire, he travels with Sam and Pippin in the pretense of moving houses to Crick Hollow. But they almost walk into a Black Rider and then continuously try to avoid him. As they wonder which path they should go, Pippin suggests that they could go to the old Farmer Maggot, because he is close by and would probably offer them a roof over their heads, and maybe even some dinner. Frodo is against it, not because it's a bad idea, but because when he was younger and still lived with his brandy buck side of the family, he stole some mushrooms from Farmer Maggot. And rightfully so, he was chased by the angry and big dogs of the farmer. And 30 years later, Frodo was still terrified of him and his dogs. But, given it had been so many years and Frodo had grown up to be quite a respectable hobbit, and with the backup present in Sam and Pippin, Frodo was convinced to then go to Farmer Maggot. There, they were welcomed with almost open arms, and Farmer Maggot laughed at the memory of Frodo stealing mushrooms, writing it off as a stupid thing young hobbits do. At dinner then, he tells them that a Black Rider had come to him not long before they showed up. He had asked about Bagginses and if there was one close by. And as I said in a previous episode, Farmer Maggot basically told the rider to get lost and that he won't tell him anything, and if he wouldn't leave, he'd put his dogs onto him. The Nazgul's response was a hiss, and then he was gone. Legend. This guy, this farmer, was not scared of something most, if not all big people were scared of. After their dinner, he gives them a ride to Brandywine Bridge to evade the Black Riders, and on that way they bump into Merry, who had grown worried that Frodo and co hadn't arrived at Crick Hollow yet, and so he decided to look on them on the road. And that's how Merry joins the group, and we end the chapter with the four hobbits crossing the river and Farmer Maggot handing them a basket of mushrooms to eat later on their journey. Ah, full circle. So, you see there was a good amount of change here, but it sort of had to happen because in the movie the entire plot to move to Crick Hollow, well, doesn't exist. Frodo immediately departs when Gandalf says so. Thus, the movie has to expedite some things. And it works for the movie's benefit, because it gets to the action and the major plot much quicker. We cut away from the hobbits and see that they are approaching a cliff. Unaware of the future drop, they rush towards it. I am surprised that neither Pippin or Merry recall this sudden end, because, as one can guess, they are frequently stealing from this poor old farmer. I would remember the layout of my previous heist location and surroundings. Don't you need to know that anyway? Or did they simply memorize how the old maggot did his rounds and then snuck in when he wasn't there? But this is a massive field. He can't be everywhere or have eyes everywhere. Even his dogs have limits, and from what I understand, they mostly patrol the place. So maybe they simply remembered the dog's routines? But even then, they would have to memorize the place. Ugh, whatever. The fool of a Took realizes his error is too late and stops right before the drop of the hill. He is still holding some carrots in his right arm and a cabbage in his left. And surprisingly, he doesn't fall. Yet. But one by one they bump into each other. Merry, who is holding onto some carrots still, bumps into Pippin, and Frodo into Merry. It all seems manageable. Until Sam bumps into Frodo, and that was one hobbit too many. They all tumble down the hill and fall and turn over. Pippin is holding onto the cabbage for dear life. I would too, hold onto something if I were to fall. I can see several injured hobbits at the end of this thing. My back screams in horror seeing the tumbling they are going through. Sam especially hurts to see because he has so much stuff on his back and probably gets some of them smashed into his face or side while he's rolling down the hill. With a heavy thud, we arrive on a road, and similarly to before, the hobbits fall now onto each other, one by one. And the music also has come to a sudden stop with the abrupt arrival on the bottom. We see Frodo land on his back and all air is punched right out of him. I hope the ring is still in that pocket, because I remind you, at this time the ring is not on a chain, it is simply chilling in Frodo's breast pocket. My brother in Eru, I would check with a frenzy panic if the ring is still there. I assume it has a button that keeps it closed, but buttons can come off. I mean, I have a bag where sometimes I pin, pins onto it, and those fall off from time to time because of several reasons. Either they get tangled up with something else, or the bag gets stuck on a corner, or, heaven forbid, the bag gets dropped too hard. But never did I fall down a hill with my bag. I check when I gently stumble if everything is still there. What I am saying is, check what you got in your pockets, you little hobbit. Ahem. Sam is spitting out some grass, and some feet are a little too close to his face for my own comfort. We cut to Pippin, who happily points out that this was close, and we see a pile of green stuff. Could be broccoli, but there is the sound of flies, and it looks like a turd, so a green turd of something? Didn't Ent make his business here? Why am I hearing flies like it's going around some shit? And why is it not brown? Why is this green turd here? What is this? We move over the pile of hobbits a bit and see the cabbage once held by Pippin is now decently crushed under his weight. Then we see Merry and get to see some more details on his coat jacket. It looks like a fluorescent design. At least right there on his breast pocket area, I can make out a swirly pattern that looks like a painted version of a rose. Or it could be some tree as well. But when we move a little closer onto him, we can see some finer lines below and some that look like little leaves below the circle shape and attached to what might be the stem. So those are very likely flowers with leaves that are connected through many lines as stems. Now, I couldn't really find any particular flower related to the brandybucks or if they are particular great flower gardeners, but they are a wealthy family and I can imagine that they like to wear more fancy looking clothes, even though they are still very much farm people. Again, they are a bit queer, the perfect company for Baggins and Tooks, who are also very much the same. Ah yes, poor Sam, he's the only normal one here. Merry comments that he must have broken something, and as he pulls that something out, it is revealed to be a carrot, and he gives off a little sigh of relief but also surprise. What else did you think it was, Merry? Did you think that you could just pull out a bone from your back? Because if that would have been possible, then, well, you wouldn't have been able to move, let alone groan in partial pain. As we are seeing Merry here on the floor, there are constant feet in the picture on the left side of the screen, which I would associate to Frodo, because he is lying on his back and his feet look like this, pointed upwards. Also, we shift to Sam next, and he is basically on his knees, and then the feet we see with Merry are, well, I wouldn't think that a hobbit who lies face first would have his feet, well, like that. If that were the case, I would be very worried, and in the middle of calling an ambulance. Speaking of ambulance, beside being dirty and scratched up, the hobbits are fine, miraculously. Well, fine is one way to look at it because Sam is clearly very annoyed and says that stuff like that just happens when you trust a brandybuck and a Took. Not literally, but that's the gist of it. And as he lifts himself up, a loaf of bread falls out of his pack and we see a row of dried sausage dangle behind him. I have never seen anyone travel like this in real life. At first, I thought, Nah, the sausage probably plopped out when he fell down the hill. But no, when he turns in the field to run away like the others, in that short frame, we see that the sausages are already dangling outside the pack. Perhaps it was normal to travel like this back in the day, and since the sausages were dried already, one didn't have to worry about them smelling too much or going bad. But they were traveling on the open sun, and in a field where there are so many little bugs and critters, they would have had a field day with such a thing, no? Maybe the bugs in the Shire are hardcore vegetarians. Merry counters to Sam's comment that this was great, since this is a shortcut, and they pat off the dirt and dust they collected during their tumble. When Sam then asks where the shortcut would lead, Pippin answers with mushrooms, and we cut to a collection of mushrooms growing wild a few meters ahead of the quartet. I am impressed that Pippin even saw them from this distance. Sure, it's not super far away, but if I had been fallen down a decent-sized hill and not gotten any brain injury, believe me, I think my senses would be busy recalibrating. But not a hobbit brain. Nuh-uh, food is the main objective, and by Eru, there is food. We see Merry look at Sam with an expression that says, "Holy shit, I did not expect that this was an actual shortcut. Sam, I am all-knowing." And while Pippin looks thrilled and tries to get up, Sam quickly pushes him back down to get to the mushrooms first. All the while, Frodo stands on the left side of the screen and pays no attention to that hobbitish fighting. The mushrooms we see here are white and a bit brown and seem to be short and have thicker stems. Well, some do at least. After some research, I think it could be the meadow mushroom, also called Agaricus campestris, since those look fairly similar to the ones we see on screen. They are shorter than other mushrooms and have a thicker stem. They can also be found in New Zealand. Though there also is the button mushroom, which is the most eaten mushroom overall, and that one also grows in New Zealand. The button mushrooms are the ones you would see on a pizza, for example. But again, I don't think it's the button mushrooms. They look a bit too big to be button mushrooms, and it would make some sense to see meadow mushrooms since we are on a path that opens up and that would let in more sunlight, like a meadow. I am no mushroom expert, so if one of you has a better idea of which kind of mushroom this can be, let me know. I am eager and hungry. For mushrooms! I mean knowledge. I actually don't like mushrooms. Please don't tell my hobbits. While the others are plundering Mother Nature, Frodo looks a little around with a contemplating look, and there is a sudden realization on him. We cut away and we too realize something. We are on the road, and the music too shifts dramatically with a foreboding tone. Uh-oh, Gandalf did tell Frodo and us, the audience, that we should stay off the road, and now we are placed right here in the middle with nothing for cover. The music plays slowly, like something is approaching in the distance, like a white shark, but a bit lighter and dramatics. Frodo walks a little forward while the others are discussing which mushrooms to take with them. He then asks them if they could get off the road, and they pay him absolutely no mind. Frodo turns his head back to the road and he hears a horrible screeching and hissing noise coming from the distance. We switch to his perspective and see the road and forest before him. And right here is this cool zoom effect, which is called a Dolly Zoom, that happens here to give us a feeling of disorientation and unease. The Dolly Zoom, or vertigo effect, is a nice effect to disorientate the audience when something, well, odd or strange happens. It is quite, well, easy to pull off if you know how and if you have the right camera. Simply put, it's an optical illusion where the camera zooms in or out, but during that time, the camera is steadily pulled away or moved into the frame further, creating this bizarre vision of zooming in but still getting away, or zooming out and still getting closer. And for background shot like this one here, with only trees and nature in the frame, a wide-angle lens camera is perfect because it can capture more detail. If a person would be in that shot, they would be pulled apart a little bit. Not noticeably so that it would throw you off, but still visible if you'd put the before and after zoom person next to each other. At least, I think this is a Dolly Zoom. It looks and feels like it to me. Maybe they enhanced it with some effect of their own during post-production, but it certainly has me feeling weird and anxious. You know, like it's bizarre, like it's a Dolly Zoom. We cut back to Frodo and the wind is passing through the leaves on the road and it seems to carry the eerie screech and only Frodo seems to be aware of it. To be honest, if my sole focus was food, I wouldn't notice much myself. The three hobbits in the back are partially excused. However, I do believe it is also because Frodo has the ring, and therefore he is more perceptive to things like these. We zoom onto Frodo and something in him finally clicks and he realizes that Gandalf's warning of staying off the road was to be taken very seriously, because whatever is coming is not friendly and will 100% not give two shits about their mushrooms. He shouts at them that they have to get off the road, and after that we see them do so. Merry first with vegetable in his pockets and a white sack in which they had put the mushrooms in. He climbs over a massive root and then jumps down and settles inside a nice little natural cave. You know, the roots are so big and outside the earth that they build some sort of roof. The perfect place to hide under and become an iconic image for generations to come. After Merry, it's Sam, followed by Pippin, and Frodo is lost. You'd think he'd be the first, but given how these three would dilly-dally if he wouldn't pester them, it makes sense that he'd be the last to make sure and maybe even push them off the road. They all sit down, and while Pippin, Merry and Sam are checking the bag full of mushrooms, Frodo has zero interest and looks forward with an almost stunned expression. And it is really subtle, but we hear no music at all, only the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves. And on the right side of the screen, where the tree is standing, white fog is creeping in. The entire scene gets a colder tone in color. Before it was warm and orange, and now it's getting bluish in color. Similarly to when we were in Orthanc, a feeling of unease and cold is coming over us. As the audience, we feel often for and with the main character, and in this instance, this is Frodo, and because we hear heavy steps coming their way, and shortly after, a black horse is coming into view from behind the tree. And that finally shuts the other hobbits up. The camera pans downward and we are looking up to see the rider of the horse. A black rider clad in black robes equipped with a sword that would give anyone touching it a bad case of tetanus. There is no face but a hollow darkness that occupies the area inside his hood. And we have one of the most famous shots right here, I would say from the Fellowship. The four hobbits hiding right beneath a Nazgul. And where is this? Remember the locations from last episode? Exactly, we are on Mount Victoria. This scene is pretty much the first image that pops up when you Google Mount Victoria Lord of the Rings. They filmed several scenes there, of course, but this one is probably the most famous one. The roots that cover the hobbits here are not real. If you check the area today, there is no fancy, cool and gnarly tree that could shelter you from the eyes of Mordor. But the enemy of said Mordor in this scene doesn't care where we are, for it is an Nazgul, one of the 9 has come in search of the One Ring. This guy is so incredibly close of succeeding in the one goal he has. I think the only other Nazgul who got this close was the Witch King of Angmar on Weathered Top, later in the film. Maybe it's just the same one? It's hard to tell, because they all kind of look the same.
Oh, don't give me that! He's a Nazgul! I can't be racist towards a Nazgul!
We cut to Frodo, who swallows hard and tries to make out what has come. He turns his head and we have this cool angle where we look through the roots at him and he looks back on us. His eyes are filled with fear and they are wide open. Then we shift back to Frodo's perspective and see what he sees through the roots, since we can see the roots in the top and right corner of the screen. And he sees the bloody hoofs of the black horse, and they are bloody because nails are pierced through it. What the fuck, Sauron? I get it that you're the evil Lord of Evil, but that is extreme. Torture and conquest I can excuse, but animal abuse?
You can excuse what?
When I was younger, I assumed that the horses too were of magical nature. You know, similar to the Nazgul, they are of darkness and shadow made. I don't know how to call it otherwise. But no, according to the book, the horses the 9 ride are, well, normal black horses. They can endure a lot and have been bred to be just as cruel as their riders, however you make that happen. But they are, at the end, normal horses. Great, so normal horses have nails stuck in their hooves like some savage was working with their shoes. Sauron, you need to fire your stablemaster. Whoever he was, he did a shit job and the horse forever be in a shittier condition because of it. We cut from the hooves to the face of the horse and oh my, Eruit has red eyes. This cannot be a normal horse, right? Because its iris is red. Sure, horses can have red eyes, but that is often a sign of infection or illness. It's the same for us. We can have red eyes too, but not red irises. Okay, sure, maybe an albino horse could, but this is literally the opposite of an albino horse. It's pitch black and carries a rider of the Shadowlands with it, okay? There is also a weird white substance flowing down its head. I have no idea what that could be. It could be some sort of gunk or sign of infection. Probably it's here to show us that this is no normal horse and even moves with some weird infected disease on it. Yeah, no shit, movie. I never thought that this would be a normal horse, you know, with its red eyes, iris, whatever. Sam and Merry also look troubled and look up and turn their ears wide open to hear whatever has come, because they can't really see who is there. Whoomp! With heavy metal boots, the Nazgul jumps off his horse, and Frodo quickly turns his head away and presses himself even deeper into the earth beneath the roots. We cut back to the front of the Hobbits and are looking up in a slanted angle, also called a Dutch angle. Such an angle is used to give you a weird and uneasy feeling, similar to a Dolly Zoom. Fun fact! A Dutch angle is actually a German invention and not a Dutch one, and was even called a Deutscher angle or Deutscher Winkel. But over time, people kept fucking up the pronunciation, and now it's called a Dutch angle, even though the Dutch didn't invent the thing at all. But the languages do sound similar. Well, Dutch sounds like a drunk German. So maybe people were perpetually drunk when talking about the Dutch angle. Fun fact number 2. If you Google Dutch angle, your browser window will be tilted like a Dutch angle. I love little gimmicks like this. It's the same as typing do a barrel roll and the entire window turns one time 360 degrees. The Nazgul is holding on to the roots of the tree and the hobbits look up in fear and terror. Cut to the hand of the Nazgul, which is covered by a metal glove that looks like a cutting hazard. We see Frodo through the roots as he turns his head super quickly to the Nazgul's hand, which is practically right next to his head. This is way too close for comfort. And then we hear something. The Nazgul is sniffing, smelling the air for something. He's trying to sniff out the ring. And while he does this, we see Sam holding onto himself and shutting his eyes super tightly close. He feels utterly terrified. Pippin also looks scared and he almost looks paralyzed. He probably too can see the gloved hand of the Nazgul. Merry looks worried but not scared from this angle, and Frodo sits there with his mouth wide open like he was stung by a horrible deadly spider that gave him a paralyzing venom or something. What? I'd like to point out your attention to something. Can you hear it? No? Of course you can't. There is still no music at all. We, as the audience, experience this terror the same way the hobbits do, in utter silence. And that is a clever trick in the film industry. Throughout, we had music, but when it cuts out in a moment of tension, well, then we are most likely to pay even more attention, because our senses have more room to take in what is shown to us. And what is shown is less great for people with arachnophobia, because we cut to Sam and Merry and a massive spider is crawling over Merry's shoulder. This is a Huntsman spider, also called giant crab spider. Yeah, no kidding. They are native to tropical and warm regions worldwide, but they are not native to New Zealand. And this spider here is real. Yeah, no CGI, this is a real spider. Dominic Monaghan, aka Merry, revealed in an Instagram Q&A that it was indeed a real spider that crawled over his shoulder. Fun! He and Sean Austin, aka Sam, were understandably a bit shocked by its sight, but the animal was friendly to humans and never did anything. And don't worry, the actors of course knew that a spider would be crawling on one of them. But even if you do, seeing it this close to your own face would shock and spook you no matter how prepared you are. The Huntsman spider is crawling down from Merry, and we cut to the hand of the Nazgul, which clenches the roots even harder, and from a hole in the wood we see a centipede rush out, almost fleeing its home. Then we see Pippin, who looks onto the earth and sees all the worms wriggling and twitching beneath his gross-looking hobbit feet. I know you hobbits take pride in your feet, but I don't need to see this up close. Ugh. Throughout the scene, we can hear the sniffling sound of the Nazgul, and it feels weird and unnatural. I have cats, and if they sniff me, it sounds normal and cute. This is just wrong, but I mean that in a positive sense. You know, it's meant to sound wrong and unnatural, so great job here. But what is going on? Well, when I was a child, I assumed the Nazgul would summon or beckon the bugs and spooky-looking animals to make the hobbits scared and show themselves. But now, as an adult who has also read the books, I believe these things are running away. They sense the evil and unnaturalness of the Nazgul, and they want to go away as far as possible. Because in the books, it's a little different. Because of course it is. The third chapter, called Three is a Company, is the chapter where the hobbits just escape the Black Rider who is hot on their tail. There, it is only Frodo, Sam, and Pippin. Merry joins them at the end of the next chapter called A Shortcut to Mushrooms. In the third chapter, they too find themselves on the road by chance, and they all hear the galloping sound of hoofs. At first, they thought it might be Gandalf, but Frodo insists that they should get off the road no matter who it is, because he doesn't want to be seen first if he can help it. So they run to a hollow not far from the road, and they lay there flat, and quickly the scene plays out the same as it does here. Though the bugs are not described as fleeing, but the general mood and eeriness of the moment doesn't get lost. There is this aura of foreboding, evil, and terror, and as you read, you can feel this discomfort, and you too just want to get away. And I think they did an excellent job here, because when I watch the scene, I too want to just get far away from this place, from this creature that has just appeared. And speaking of wanting to disappear, we see Frodo's face and his mouth is agape, and only now does some background noise come back. It sounds like we're in a dome, kind of like being on the water? I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like a continuous low rumbling that gets louder with every sniff the Nazgul makes. Then the rumbling gets even louder, and Frodo's eyes turn in his head and he closes them. His expression is shifting, and it seems he has a terrible headache, like he is fighting a bad migraine or a bad thought. Then we cut to his hands and we see he has the One Ring out and he's twirling it in one. Then he preps it up, and on the other side his index finger is ready, stretched out as if he wants to put the ring on. And, well, that is exactly his thought here. Frodo thinks how great it would be to escape this dreadful situation. He doesn't want to be discovered, he wants to disappear. And he knows the ring can do that, because that's what Bilbo had used it for in the past. But also he knows and remembers Gandalf's word that he must never wear it, no matter what happens. We cut back to the Nazgul turning his head, still trying to sniff out the ring. We cut to the horse with its red eyes and gunk coming down. It weighs slightly and it all sounds weirdly echoey, as if we were underwater and can't hear it fully. Then we see Frodo's face again. His eyes are still closed, his breathing is stuttering, and there is a great inner turmoil happening. You can see how he's arguing with himself, that he mustn't put on the ring, he must not disappear, but he is fighting rationality with instinct. His body is terrified and wants to vanish, and the ring taps into this fear and with its influence tries to make Frodo put it on. And slowly we can hear the guttural whisper of the One Ring, the voice of Sauron beckoning Frodo. It is only faint and only for a short moment, but you can hear it. We cut back to the ring and finger, and it gets closer and closer. It's almost there. And right before he puts it on, Sam notices and takes a hold of Frodo's arm. And Merry, meanwhile, looks utterly confused, as if he was thinking, Frodo, are you alright? Why do you look like someone who's horribly constipated, cousin? But that little tap snaps Frodo back to reality, and he opens his eyes and he puts his hands away from each other. And that little noise made the Nazgul aware of something close by, because he immediately moves his head to pick up more. At least, I think that's the idea. Cut to Merry, who has a great idea and throws one of the provision bags of Sam around the tree to take away the attention of the Nazgul. We can see some small lids and other things fly out of the bag as it goes through the air. When the bag hits the floor, the Nazgul screeches and immediately goes away, back onto his horse, and follows the direction the noise had come from. It's not really that far, but hey, it's something. The moment of distraction is immediately used, and Merry gets up and runs, followed by Pippin, who looks incredibly pale, which makes sense. Unlike the others, he actually saw bits of the Nazgul, similar to Frodo. And then Sam pulls Frodo with him. The music comes back in, and it's the melody we often associate with the Nazgul and the ring. We are now a little down the hill, and the light has shifted greatly. It's warmer and brighter already with the absence of the Nazgul. There are small, thin trees, and we hear Merry breathlessly as he falls onto his back, followed by Pippin, who does the very same thing. By Eru, they really do everything together, huh? Afterwards, Merry asks what that was, and Pippin looks back to where they had run off from. But Merry gets no answer, as we see them all breathe heavily, and the camera moves over to Frodo, who looks down onto his clenched fist as he slowly opens it. There, with a dramatic dun-dun, we see the ring. This was the first time the ring had actively influenced Frodo, compelling him to put it on, but not to help him. No, never. Like Gandalf said, it wants to be found, and I believe Frodo now realizes the actual danger he is in. The expression he has right before we cut to the close-up shot of the ring is a wonderful, "Oh shit." Time and scene change. It is night. The forest is dark and gloomy. White fog is coming in from the right side of the screen, and we hear the heavy hoofs of a horse. And then we see it, a black rider on it. It's the Nazgul. The camera cuts and we see the Nazgul now fully in the shot and in the center of the screen. He turns the horse around and screeches horribly into the night. It echoes throughout the woods, and it is clear that the hobbits are in horrible danger. All while a spooky choir is going off in the background of the score. Choirs always give you such an otherworldly feeling. At least to me, I'm a sucker for choir music. Fun fact. I was too young when the movie came out to watch in the theater. You know, that was in 2001, and I was about 6 years old. No chance in hell would my mom have permitted me to see this. With her knowing, of course. I watched a good deal of it at a friend's place a few months later, but that's not the fun fact I want to talk about. My grandmother, who had read The Lord of the Rings and very much liked Tolkien's writing a lot, actually went and saw the first Lord of the Rings movie in the cinema. And I remember being super envious of her. I asked her a lot of questions, of course, but the one thing I still remember well is what she told me about her impression of the Nazgul. They were scarier in the books. And I thought, wow, my grandma's the toughest grandma around, because I was utterly terrified by the Nazgul. But some years later, when I had read the books myself, I understood what she meant. Yes, the Nazgul here are scary and creepy, but in the books they are incredibly unsettling. A slow fear that builds and tackles something in your subconscious almost. Thank you, Mumma, for being a cool and fearless grandma. Back to the film. Still, I think they did a marvelous job with the Nazgul here and their introduction. They come up when the main gang is utterly helpless and exposed and alone, adding to that feeling of helplessness. We cut and see a big tree with sap on its bark, and Frodo is coming into view, holding onto it. He seems to be looking and listening for something. Ooh, whatever can it be? Well, let's not talk around it. He's looking for the Nazgul. The hobbits are rushing over the earth, and we hear their feet do the little tippy-tappy sounds. The fog is getting denser, and they are becoming dark silhouettes themselves compared to the pale background. Then Frodo stops at another tree, looking around its bark, with Merry right behind him. And Merry's playful demeanor is gone, and he too seems completely locked into the task of looking for the Black Rider. He looks over Frodo's shoulder and... that is it. We have reached the 5-minute mark, and thus the end of this episode. And I hope you enjoyed. Again, when so much action is happening, we have to end it here. But oh boy, am I looking forward to the chase scene later and with the orchestral music that accompanies it. Ooh, that's gonna be good. So, until then, you must wait, and so must I, but we can manage this. I apologize if I sometimes sounded tired or not as enthusiastic, but at times it was just so incredibly hot and the pressure of the heat was just... oh god, it was just getting to me, let me tell you. Like always, I worried that I wouldn't have much to talk about, but at this point I should simply shut up my own worries and just do the thing and see that we are at page 25 of the script already. I enjoy talking about the different movie techniques, you know, the angles, the zoom, though it was a short section. But I also like to talk about the differences in the book and the movie, because they combine some cool things from each chapter to create this cool scene with the Nazgul. It's also just fun that the plot is now kicking into high gear, and some action is taking place. We are almost at the 1 hour mark. That is a milestone in itself, and we'll get there next episode, and I am looking forward to it. Also, a little spoiler, we will reach Bree next episode. Yes! For people who have never played The Lord of the Rings online, this love and nostalgia for Bree will make little sense, but hey, this is my podcast, and I gush over any fictional town as much as I like. Thank you. I hope you have good days coming your way, at least some where you don't melt. Here in Switzerland the summer is anything but pleasant. Sure, you can swim somewhere in lakes or rivers, but, you know, the sun is still there, always watching, with menace. So, keep yourself cool, slurp some ice cream, devour a watermelon or two, and tune in next time for the 5-minute The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring podcast. Take care.